Good morning again. It's 6:11. This is Monday morning, March 25. We are in our Memorial Day weekend here in the United States, and which we recognize those that gave their lives for a cause, particularly, obviously, the way of life and ideas, philosophies, the Constitution of the United States. The Constitution gives us the right to worship. Probably one of the great doctrines politically and in constitutions around the world is the First Amendment of the United States, in which it guarantees the right of speech and guarantees the right of religion. I cannot think of another country that has that kind of ability. And when our troops go to war, they're fighting many times for that right for us to sustain it. And sometimes they're fighting for that right for somebody else. Good morning. We are continuing our study in the life of Jeremiah. We spent the first week to kind of just set the stage of where Jeremiah was. So real fast, briefly, we'll go through where Jeremiah was. Jeremiah was a man who, in his 30s, was living under a righteous king, Josiah. Josiah dies unexpectedly in battle, and his son takes rule, but his son is not like his dad. His son begins to go in the direction of evil, and from there we go from this set of kings all the way to Zedekiah. And Zedekiah is probably the worst thorn in Jeremiah's side. He's a very wicked king. And he inflicts a lot onto Jeremiah. Because remember, Jeremiah has been called to do something that is rather difficult. And we go back to the fact that Jeremiah he saw himself as a child in the eyes of God's calling. He didn't have confidence in doing this. The Lord rebukes him and says, I'm with you. He says, you're going to go speak what I've told you to speak, but if you don't, I'm going to confound you. And I'm going to have a chastisement upon you. This obviously motivates Jeremiah, and he goes ahead and he begins to preach the messages of God. So we are springboarding all the way up eventually to Jeremiah 38. But before we do that, I want us to reflect on the bookends of Jeremiah's life. We have Josiah, king, righteous, everything's going good. Wonderful season of religious revival and things going on in a very positive way. We're going to spring all the way to the other side, to Zedekiah and the book of Lamentation particularly, to show where Jeremiah had been. We've already talked about where he was, but now we're going to go to where he is in that kind of fashion. And so let's look at some things from the book of Lamentation. Okay, the book of Lamentation. This ranks right up there with the book of Job. When you're talking about misery and people who live and have misery, the book of Lamentations is a part of that. Notice some of the things that I've circled here. For instance, we have the word affliction here. We have the word affliction here. We have a phrase that says no rest. We have the word affliction here. We have no comforter here. We have affliction there. And that's primarily just dealing with the nation of Israel. But Jeremiah is in that. Sometimes we forget that God may be bringing a judgment, a chastisement upon a country. But the righteous are still afflicted in that. Jeremiah is being afflicted. He's a righteous man. He's trying to do what's right in an evil country, and he's being afflicted for it. Okay, God's grace is always sufficient, but it just means it's not going to be as easy as we thought. Now, when we go to Jeremiah, we change from a few things. We start to get into these pronouns, I. Now he's making this personal. Now he's making this very, very personal. And notice where he says, I am become vile. Sorrow like unto my sorrow, which is done unto me, wherewith the Lord hath afflicted me in the days of his fierce anger. From above hath he sent fire into my bones. He says, he hath spread a net for my feet, he hath turned me back. He hath made me desolate and faint all the day. The yoke of my transgression, my neck, I am not able to rise up. The Lord hath trodden under foot all my mighty men. He hath called an assembly against me and crushed me. I bet every one of us can relate to that, can't we? And we all have this tendency to, God's a bad guy doing this to me, and I don't mean that to be. Some people might interpret that as, oh, I can never think of God that way. Well, I'm just going to tell you, most of us do. We always have those moments where we get really bothered by what God is doing, and we don't know how to express it. But you know what? God's got big shoulders. He's okay with our little understanding sometimes. And these cries that come from the Psalms, like David, and they come from Jeremiah, they come from Job, they're just cries of the heart. They're cries of depression and desperation that we don't know what to do. God, where are you in the midst of all this misery? Why are you afflicting me this way? Why are you allowing it this way? I still hold on to the fact that you're just and you're loving, but I cannot see where this is going. This is hard. I need your help. Why won't you help me now? Has anyone ever related to that? I think we all have. There have been those moments, and Jeremiah is expressing this, and that's what's so nice about the beauty of the Scriptures. God doesn't hold anything back. He's not afraid. Nothing going to damage him. He's very confident in who he is and what he's doing. But he wants us to see how people and human nature is. And I have written here in the feeling. I think the feeling is best expressed by Jeremiah in chapter 1 of Lamentations, verse 6, where it says this. He says, they are gone without strength before the pursuer. I think we all come to that place where we are just without strength, aren't we? We're being pursued. We're in the heat of the battle. It's hard for us to hold on. We're doing all we can, and we're just like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Now, Lamentation moves on, and we're going to come back and touch on this because this is a very powerful writing. It is the heart of a righteous prophet as he looks to a people being judged by God, bringing wrath and chastisement upon of God on a people, and he himself experiencing some of this. Let me show you just in part what he has to experience. This is just a artist rendition, but this is a picture of what we're going to see with Jeremiah under Zedekiah. He's in a cistern. Basically, he's in a septic tank. He has been dropped into this septic tank, and that's where he must stay, day in, day out, in this sludge, this disgusting place, in this area as the prison. That's where he ends up. Aren't you grateful none of us have had to go there yet, right? This is where he ends up. And remember, he is forewarned all the way back in chapter number 1 that's why God gives us that word. He gives him that word that says, it's going to get pretty bad, but I will be with you, and they will not conquer you. You will make it. And so he has to keep claiming that verse, those words of God over and over again. And now notice where it goes in Lamentation chapter number 3. Jeremiah writes, I am the man that hath seen affliction by the rod of his wrath. He hath led me and brought me into darkness, but not into light. Surely against me is he turned his hand against me in all the day. My flesh and my skin hath he made old, he hath broken my bones. He hath builded against me and compassed me with gall and travail. He has set me in dark places. as they that be dead of old. He hath hedged me about that I cannot get out. He hath made my chain heavy. That's the picture of that septic tank. And we're going to read about it when we go back to Jeremiah. We're going to see how this plays out from Jeremiah 37 on. And we'll skip through that as fast as we can, but also not giving injustice to the writing. But all of us have to come to where Jeremiah eventually comes. And that's in Jeremiah chapter number 3 later on. And so I lay this picture out that we have a very righteous man. Basically, he has done nothing wrong. He's only tried to be faithful to God, and he has continually suffered for it. And we see a beautiful picture of God giving him the word that he can rely upon while he goes through these trials. And we see how God's grace is sufficient for him to finish through what it is he has to go through. But this is where he finally concludes, and this is where all of us need to conclude. And here's where it is, beginning, I think, in chapter 3 of verse 18. We'll just read this to show again this continuation of Jeremiah. He says, "And thou hast removed my soul far off from peace. I forgot prosperity." Then he says, "And I said, my strength and my hope is perished from the Lord." And then, here we go. "Remembering mine affliction and my misery, the wormwood and the gall, my soul hath then still in remembrance and is humbled in me. This I recall to my mind, therefore I have hope." Now, just step back with me just a second. He says, I don't have any peace. My affliction is terrible. And then something hits him. You ever have that aha moment where all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait a minute. See, everything he's been communicating up to this point is a sense that he feels God has forsaken him. God has forgotten him. And I assure you, every one of us have been in that place. Or if you haven't, you will. We have to acknowledge that there are times when we feel like there is no one that can touch my soul. There is no one that can help me. And see, again, in this picture of where Jeremiah is, he's in misery. He's meditating on the things of God. And all of a sudden, if I could use this analogy, the Holy Spirit drops a thought into his head. And all of a sudden, hope is revived. Here's how that goes. He says, I recall this to my mind, and therefore I have hope. It is of the Lord's mercies that we are not consumed, because his compassions fail not. They are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, saith my soul. Therefore will I hope in him. The Lord is good unto them that wait for him, to the soul that seek him. It is good that a man should both hope and quietly wait for the salvation of the Lord. It is good for a man that he bear the yoke in his youth. Here's the gist of what I get from that. He says, wait a minute, I haven't died. I'm still alive. Now, this is an interesting thought. Walk with me a little bit on this. He says, I haven't died. That means God's grace is still sufficient. God is still with me. I will continue to hope in God. I will continue to wait upon God. It is good that I wait and I hope on God. It is good that I quietly wait and hope upon God, even if I'm in the middle of a septic tank, even if I'm witnessing the atrocities of a people who say they claim to know God and don't follow him. Even if I hear the battle of swords or the commencement of the Babylonian troops, the Chaldees, coming down upon Jerusalem. Even then, no matter what is happening, it is good for me to wait quietly upon the Lord. He has not consumed me. Great is his faithfulness. We all have to go there. I don't know where your journey is or where you are in that journey, but I assure you that every one of us are going to the same place. The same place in our misery is to come to that quiet place in which we recognize there is a God who is still with me in the darkness. There's still a God with me in the septic tank. There's a God with me even though there's no one else that can help me. When my strength is weakening among the pursuers, there is still a God whose grace is sufficient. I have not been consumed. I have not gone to that place yet, which means there is a God who's keeping me alive, and there's a purpose for all of this if I but wait and see where it goes. We serve a great God. He is worth it. Go with him. Let him go with you. You'll find the blessing. Good day.